Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace reporting live here at Terremoto Coffee Room here in Chelsea, here in New York City. As you know, for the last 6 months here at Terremoto Coffee Room, Benny Bernanke III has hosted some dynamic jazz jam sessions here on Saturday and Sundays. But also the jazz community has come out in fold to support some of the stalwarts of the business, including the great Victor Lewis, as well as George Cables, as well as jazz organist Gregory Lewis. Now, Gregory Lewis hails from Queens, New York, and he's toured extensively all over the world with his dynamic Hammond B-3 ensemble entitled Organ Monk Blue. Now, the album is out, and it's been out, and it's available on iTunes, Amazon.com, as well as Google Play. But this gentleman has paid an homage to one of the great prolific jazz composers, Thelonious Monk. And for the last 5 recordings, he's revisioned Monk in so many different amalgamations with his organ quartet and trio ensembles. Tonight here at Terremoto Coffee Room, you're going to see highlights of him performing music with his ensemble. And I had a chance to sit down to break bread with them to reflect on the importance of the Hammond B-3 in jazz, as well as its roots in the church. Also, how he was exposed to the Hammond B-3 and how he decided to take a role in bringing Thelonious Monk fans to the Hammond B-3, as well as talk about and reflect on some of his musical influences, as well as mentors ranging from the great Walter Davis Jr. and the great Jackie Bayard. So sit back, relax, and enjoy highlights of Mr. Gregory Lewis performing music, Organ Monk Blue, here at Terremoto Coffee Room for the extensive jazz jam sessions here on the Pace Report, live here in Chelsea. Gregory Lewis, Thelonious Monk is pretty much one of the quintessential composers of American history, American black music. He's up there with Duke Ellington, Cole Porter. I even have to put Wayne Shorter in there now because Wayne's still composing.
Yeah.
How do you take his complex compositions and put it in the B3 trio form?
Oh, well, it's interesting. For me, I didn't know it was complex, maybe because I was hearing it from such a young age all my life. It was so, as far as jazz was concerned, my father had the records. He played them. He played Coltrane, Monk, and Miles, and Bud Powell all the time. And Monk stood out for some reason. And for me, it didn't seem complex. What seemed complex was learning when I went to the college to learn all the things you are and all these other standards. But for some reason, the Monk, it just it felt right. Even when I didn't have the correct melodies when I was learning, I had the right rhythms. So that also was interesting, learning the correct notes because I don't have perfect pitch, but I had all the right rhythms. So I maybe being able to understand it rhythmically made it easy to just transfer it to any instrument.
Now, viewers, I'm going to put a caveat out here. Now, Greg is a classically trained jazz pianist.
Yeah.
And he switched up and flipped to the B3. Now, how did this happen?
Gil Coggins, I was studying with him, and we used to play at the Village Door out in Queens, Jamaica, Queens. We used to be a well-known jazz clubs where a lot of great jazz musicians used to go after their gigs and hang out. And so Gilly sent me on a gig to sub for him. He couldn't make it, and it happened to be an organ gig. And I fell on my face, and it kind of made me say, let me try and figure out this instrument. I didn't know I was going to fall in love with it.
Now, it's crazy now. You grew up in the church, too. And
Yeah.
the organ's always in the
Yeah.
black church.
Yeah, and when I was 17, I was playing with my friend Stacy. He played bass, and we had the band. We were like 17, 18, and this church. We actually played at the church for a minute, and I should have stayed there and really dug in, but I wanted to play jazz so bad. I was like, I don't want to do this church stuff, and I just quit that gig, which I ended up playing in church later on and coming back to it. But I quit that gig and didn't really dig into the organ. I was playing piano at that church when I was like 18. And then I only played it for maybe a few months before I quit.
Now, isn't it crazy? Because, I've seen you perform over the years. Isn't it crazy how the B3 in the church functifies everything that you do on the jazz trio funk?
Yes, I always tell people if you study organ, black jazz organ in America, and you don't study church, then you're not really studying the Hammond organ. And almost every last musician who's a jazz great has either dealt with the church or come out of the church in some kind of way. Um, it's just a part of being black in America. Even if you didn't grow up religious, you got an aunt or an uncle who had some church that you visited at some point in your life, most likely. You know, so
You have recorded about 5 projects, all in homage to Thelonious Monk. How do you select the songs that you love? And what are some of your favorite Monk compositions? And in a trio setting, do you feel that that bass it kinks it kicks the groove a little bit harder for when people interpret how you play Monk?
Well, yeah, that's what I love about the organ is that being able to play the bass, you just have such total control rhythmically of what's going to happen, you and the drummer. And if you have a good drummer who listens to what you're doing, it's like heaven. Like one of my favorite drummers is Jeremy Clemons, who's on 2 or 3 of my records. I can't remember right now, but um, he listens to everything wherever I go left or right, he's right there with me. So but yes, that bass is very strong, and I studied a lot of the bass lines. I even took certain bass lines and used them for the whole song that Monk may have played as an opening or an intro, and I took those bass lines, and you can make them really funky. They just really sound great. So yeah, those, yeah, that's about it with the bass lines. They are very powerful and can push the music in a totally different direction.
1954 saw the introduction of the B3, and Fats Waller was probably one of the first cats to record on an organ,
Yeah.
but it was really Jimmy Smith who kind of took the instrument and took it to a whole nother stratosphere.
Well, yeah, I listened to some of that stuff Fats Waller did, and it's kind of funny because, Fats Waller was one of the kings of stride, and so it doesn't quite work on an organ, but it was kind of comical to hear because you could clearly see he's experimenting. But Jimmy Smith figured out that okay, I got to walk these bass lines and play these bebop lines against it. I don't know how long it took him to get that control, but it's no different, I guess, than playing Bach or counterpoint, where you have one line going opposite direction and another line playing against it. But once you get it, it just feels magical, you know.
Yeah, my grandfather was an avid Jimmy Smith fan, and I did a lot of research on him, and still doing a lot of research on Jimmy. I understand that Jimmy rented out a storage unit, and he took the B3 and he kind of shed it for like a couple of months before he actually went out and started playing in public.
Yeah, well, I read different things too. Don't quote me on this, but because I used to read all this, and especially we're talking over 20 years ago when I was in college, and really checking out what Jimmy did. And I remember reading something where he would go in and play at a place that sold the Hammond organ, and the owner let him basically use one and practice with one. And so, and yeah, and then you hear these other stories about spending time alone. But he obviously spent time. I don't know how much alone or what he did, but what he did kind of changed the whole game of I don't necessarily need a bass player. I'm going to handle it all. And like I think he probably felt that control and power over the whole band, and ran with it, and basically changed the world.
I had a question for you, and we're gonna talk about another organ player in a second. Did you, when Jimmy left Blue Note and went to Verve, he made these wild records with the strings and
Yeah.
wild side. Were you fond of those records, or were you really a fan of those traditional trio groove records?
To be honest with you, more of a fan of the trio. It's kind of like I don't want to say Austin Powers, but Austin Powers obviously, it's kind of corny, but it's the '70s, so it's the early '70s, I believe. It had to be the early '70s and or late '60s, whenever it was. Don't quote me, but it was the sign of the times. You had other influences. I'm sure Jimmy's like, whatever, give me the check. So because it clearly ain't Jimmy stuff that back at Chicken Shack and him going and bumbling and doing his thing. It's a different thing. Jimmy still sounds great because he's Jimmy Smith. The arrangements, I mean, maybe it wasn't Count Basie, but it was interesting. I did check it all out because you do. But yeah, I'm obviously a fan of the trio and quartet stuff that he would do, or more. The trio stuff. More of that stuff I'm really more fond of.
There's a record I'm going to name, and it's one word: Unity. Larry Young. Now, Unity is probably in the top four, maybe top five greatest organ records, jazz organ records of all time. And for Larry Young to come out of the gate, a debut record with the personnel he had on this record, there was something about that record that you have said is probably one of the greatest records you've ever heard.
Yeah, well, when I heard him play with the Elvin Jones duet and just duet, and then play Monk's Dream, that sparked. I mean, I guess that's what created Organ Monk. I could say literally because that really made me want to play organ more, even before I came up with the name Organ Monk. It made me want to play. I was like, wow, if he can do that, let me try Trinkle Tinkle. Let me try Skippy. Let me try Who Knows. Let me play Work. Let me try all these other crazy Monk tunes who I never heard any organ player ever play. So that's what kind of sparked the fire, and then I ran with it, and it's been a lot of fun because Monk's music is so expressive and rhythmic on the piano, but now on the organ, I got these other layers that makes it become a whole nother beast. No matter how hard you try, you're not going to be Monk on the organ because the organ is such a different instrument. But you can play his music and take it to another place, which I'm sure he would want you to do. He don't want nobody wants to just be copied and imitated. I mean, that doesn't make sense. It's already been done. I can't be Monk. I'm not Monk. I will never be Monk. I wouldn't even try and be Monk. But I love his music, and it inspires me to create my own music, and it inspires me to live and enjoy being on this planet. Listening to his music. So I just use his music as a vehicle to as a launching pad to go somewhere else.
Unity had, well, my favorite saxophonist out there. You have Joe Henderson, and then Woody Shaw.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
he's clearly on that record.
yeah, yeah. Clearly, it's. I've heard stories about about Larry Young from people like Mike Clark, backstage stories that would blow your mind. I'm not going to repeat them. But it seems like they were like-minded individuals. Woody Shaw, two genius men with who think outside the box. Is my opinion of, and it just fit well. That Moon Train. Woo! I mean, that was one of those tunes. That I was always playing. Moon Train on the organ with Woody Shaw, Larry Young. You know.
Larry left us a little early. Why do you think Larry? There was a canon of organ players. Charles Earlin, I mean Don Pat. I mean, there's a lot of organ players. Shirley Scott.
Yeah.
Why do you think that his name doesn't resonate like a Jimmy McGriff or Charles Earlin?
Well, like some people call him the Coltrane on organ. Uh, Jimmy Smith set this present of groove, and almost like party music. You could dance, you could slow grind to it. It's very sexy, very yes. The average person can hear it and just start nodding their head. Where I think Larry Young stuff took more the approach of like as Barry Harris says, train changed the game. You couldn't dance to it, as Barry Harris would say. Which for us as musicians, they ain't a problem. But I do understand where you're coming from when you're trying to please an audience, and if you lose your audience a lot of times if they can't relate, can't dance, or can't shake their hips. So I think Larry Young's music started to make people just sit there and listen, and you get a smaller audience when it's people who are just there to listen. John Abercrombie, yeah, I can't pronounce the name. Sorry, but he did a class at NYU when I was getting my master's there, and he said he went to see Larry Young with John McLaughlin and Tony Williams at a club, and I was like, "Holy shit, really?" Blah blah blah. So I said, "What was the deal?" He said it was nothing but musicians in the audience. Yeah, he said it was just way ahead of his time. It was just nothing but musicians. The people couldn't get into that. They just couldn't get into it. And so I think that's what made it not popular. Now all of us students, I think his stuff is still on Mosaic. I'm not sure. Larry Young. Now all of us organ players are jumping into Larry Young right after you hear Jimmy Smith. The next name is Larry Young, you know, and studying his music and studying how he played and taking it, you know, to another, just playing different, I would say, than more pentatonic. If and I don't want to say that because that kind of belittles it, but more pentatonic than bebop chromatic. You know, if I want to break it down to the lowest level of music, you know. So, but I love them all. You know, I love to groove on 2, 3 chords all night, or I love to get as way out as you can get. You know, where it's just sound and not dealing with changes. It's more sound than anything.
You know, it's crazy. I've been following 3 organists. It's been you, Akiko,
Oh, okay,
and
yeah.
Pat Biati. Do you think that the jazz musicians who want to play the B3, you think it's the direction moving forward is moving great with teachers like yourself on the instrument?
Oh wow, that's a hard question. I guess it's up to the students or the fans to make that call. But you know, I come from a generation where the cats weren't real kind with teaching. You know, it was sort of like you got to learn on your own, and then if they like you, they might show you a little something. But it wasn't really very. Guys weren't very open back in the day when I would go to jam sessions. They were pushing the stops. Sometimes they even turn the organ off, and you'd be like, "Oh, damn, how do you turn it on?" And, you know, stuff like that. I remember when I first started going to sessions, organ sessions, was real cutthroat. And it was cool because I was up for the challenge. I was always one of those, well, you know, I'm ready to fight. So it was fine with me. But yeah, to be honest with you, I would like to do more teaching because I listen to cats play, and it's like sometimes, you know, especially people from other cultures who come here, and they're very confident, but it's like you didn't. First of all, learning a whole nother culture is a hard thing to do. So I applaud you, and I'm glad that you're trying. But sometimes you have to give it a little more respect than what you think you're doing to it, you know. And I understand, you know, a lot of people do want to just jump on the bandwagon and take advantage of the situation because that's America. But sometimes things have to be said, you know, yeah, and the truth has to be known. You know, you just can't come in. I don't go to other countries and just you know, say, yeah, I can play this drum rhythm that you've been playing for centuries, and look, I'm great at it. And I'm, you know, but you know, people tend to do that a lot with this music, and sometimes I tell people that's why the music is not as popular because you got other people uh, perpetrating a fraud and playing this music and making it sound corny and making it not hip like it was when Miles got on the stage and Train got on the stage and Monk got on the stage and Bird got on the stage, Phineas Newborn got on the stage, and Elmer Holt got on the stage, and I can go on. And even Oscar Peterson, there was a different kind of vibe when it was like-minded people, like-minded individuals playing, not having to tell the other person what to do, because culturally we know that you don't put raisins in macaroni and cheese. You know what I mean? So, you know, so therefore we don't even have to say things. Things just naturally link up. We all studied, and now we just start to play, and then we choose. But like I said, I do appreciate that the world loves this music that my forefathers created. My father included, and my grandfather who played piano. We're and now my son who's playing. So it's a cultural thing that needs to be addressed or talked about and respected. You know.
Greg, you were talking about the future. I was going to get your take on Matthew Whitaker. Matthew Whitaker right now, everybody is paying attention to this young brother. And one of the things I can honestly say about Matthew, just watching him grow up, he can swing on the B3.
Yep.
But he can really kill that piano.
Yeah, the boy's a genius. It's as simple as that. Obviously, we all know he's blind. I know his parents well. I remember the Jazz Foundation gigs. He's always a happy kid wanting to play. I will always let him, whenever he came to the 55 bar with his parents, get on the organ, let him play. Very encouraging. And I'm glad to see it because he's brilliant. And I always say, blind cats got this edge, and not to be funny or anything, but it's a reality that their hearing is heightened. From Art Tatum being legally blind, who was Jesus as God on piano, as I forgot who said he was God at the moment, but I think Fats Waller said God is in the house. Somebody said, with Tatum. And, he was legally blind. So, they spend a lot more time than the average person who does go out and run and play baseball, or they can spend a lot of time. And he's clearly taking advantage of it because I've heard his growth, and it's amazing, and I'm so glad to see it. I'm trying to get my son to see him so that he can get jealous and try and, be like, oh, damn, I got a lot to learn, So it's beautiful to watch, and more power to him. Last time I seen him, he was at Dizzy's. I ran in and said, "Hey, what's up?" And so it's he's doing his thing, and I love it.
You went to the new school, and two of your teachers are very important jazz icons. First of all, one of them hails from, well, he lived in your neck of the woods, Jackie Byard.
Yeah, Jackie Byard was like Jesus coming out. If I didn't meet Jackie Byard, I probably couldn't excel. He knew how to just say like, ooh, 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 ooh. What he said to me once was, because I was like, man, these guys are doing these gigs and this. He said, ooh, ooh. He's told me, you got your own sound, keep it. And I was like, well, but they won't pick me for the gig because I won't play like McCoy and I won't play like this one and that. He said, no, just keep your own sound. And I studied his exercises that were amazing. It's crazy. His
What were his exercises?
playing temps in the left hand stride type temps. You play break down the temps 1 3, 1 3 5. Is it 1 3 5, 1 3 7, 1 3 5? In the left hand, I can show you better than I can tell you. And it goes through all 12 keys. And if you practice it fast enough, all of a sudden your hands start flying around the piano. And he had all this stuff written out. He was another one in that genius category, or coming from a time where they just had a gig every night. As the way he said it, there was so much more music all the time. So if you didn't get good, you really sucked. Back from that generation. He was telling me how he used to hang out with Fats Waller, and he even told me a story. He was playing for trans, um, either trans, when they dress up in drag, in a drag show, and people were making fun of him, Jackie Byard, and then he said, I think Fats Waller defended him, like, oh, he's playing music, he's working. What about you? So he would tell me just there was so much work, in other words, and always whether it was this kind of show or that show. So you really had to be bad, or the next guy's coming and taking your gig. So yeah, so Jackie Byard was. I used to go over his house. He would, yo, what are you doing? Let's go upstate. I'm gotta go meet my son somewhere. We get in the car, hang out, get food. He was like just the father. My father unfortunately was murdered when I was 11. So he was like a musical father. I remember he held my son when he was born. He's like, "What are you doing with this baby? Let me see that baby." It's just, he was really great, and it was so upsetting when he unfortunately got murdered. Yeah, it just so it blew everyone's mind, and I couldn't believe it neither. I'm like, damn, every dad I get, kind of crazy. I know that sounds stupid and selfish, but it's like, he was my musical father that who showed me stuff that to this day I still use, and it's my go-to stuff. The diminishes and the way to use them is, I'd be honest with you, I got it from Jackie Byard.
And another one, I mean, Walter Davis Jr.
Woo! Yeah.
I mean, and what's really sad is that a lot of cats don't really. We'll talk about Mulgrew. We'll talk about.
Yeah.
But Walter was a bad boy.
Ooh, oh yeah, he played with Charlie Parker at 16, and he was telling me the stories. He told me the story. This is exactly what he said to me. That he said that he was playing with Charlie Parker, and he's young and he's comping. He was studying with Bud Powell. He was going over his house and studying with him, and I'm like, damn, it doesn't get better than that. So he said he was comping, and Charlie Parker arpeggiated the notes of his chord that he comped. And he said it felt like electrical shock. And he said Charlie Parker turned around and winked at him like, give me something else. He said, like people said the definition of hearing is Charlie Parker. So he said, Charlie, you don't know how Charlie did that, but it blew his mind as a young boy. This cat just arpeggiated what he played like, okay, you got to give me something else now. And so having that kind of training, he was just so bad. I mean, I remember almost being in tears hearing him playing a ballad. And I just think he just didn't get the fame because it wasn't YouTube and it wasn't the videos and it wasn't all that. You had to go out and see this cat play and know, because he was all over the world. I remember hanging with him, and he's like, I got to go in the mountains in Italy tomorrow. I'll be back, such and such. So he was working and doing his thing. But it's a shame, like you said, most people don't know him or know his records. Or a lot of people say, oh, he's just a Bud clone. No, he's a lot more. No. He's a lot more than a Bud clone. And if you are a Bud clone, guess what? You're not. So if that's the worst thing you can say, then you got issues. But he was a bad boy. He was a bad man, great man. So, and a lot of his lessons were more like life lessons. He used to tell me, you listen with your eyes. I was like, oh, damn. Because I'm staring at him like, it looked like it was magic he was doing. And he was right. I had to heighten my hearing. And, and so, yeah, it was fun hanging out with Walter Davis Jr.
what does jazz music mean to you?
Oh man, it means life. It means it's what got me out of the hood, so to speak, mentality. You know, I talk about hanging out with Dr. Amos Wilson in high school, who started to teach me more about the history of black people in this country and going back to the African dynasties and all of that. But the music got me to travel the world and meet people and talk to people in Africa and in Europe who don't subscribe always to the white supremacy and the craziness that's going on in America and in the world. And so it got me to see a lot of things and understand the beauty of in human beings, and it's everything for me because it's the heartbeat. It's the first language. It allowed me to do things that I never thought possible. You know, so jazz to me is just everything.
Greg, did you think in a million years, you being a father, that your son was going to follow in your footsteps? And then, as you were telling me that he's perfect pitch,
Yeah.
he's pretty much got an edge over you.
Oh yeah. That's the other thing. Perfect pitch. I have a friend Sasha Perry, pianist. He's the first young cat I knew with perfect pitch. I was like, "What's that? You can hear all that?" He's like, "Yeah, tell me the notes." So I would always mess with him, and I never thought of it as an edge necessarily because I was like, "Well, you can't play fast, you know, because we're young." So it's like, and I was like, "So you have perfect pitch, but you can't play fast," you know. So it was always, but I was always kind of envious of it because I thought it was just so cool that you can be like, "Oh, A flat, B, C, D, and E." So I don't know if it's necessarily an edge. And then there was a guy who I ain't gonna say his name who was at the new school, had perfect pitch, and he sucked. So it was like, yeah, how you have perfect pitch and you can't play? You know, I mean, he could play, but his rhythms were all funky, and but he had perfect pitch. You know, so I just said I would love for one of my kids to have it, and I messed with all my kids with music, but I think my youngest is from a different mother, and she was coming to all the gigs. My first wife wasn't coming to the gigs because she had a full-time job and wasn't always up under me like this second wife was when she was pregnant. And I think all of that had a lot to do with this boy just being, because she used to come to the gigs and say, when we would stop playing, he would start kicking around like, "Where's the music?" But when we were playing, he would be calm in the stomach. So I remember those kind of stories and all that. And I used to sing to the stomach more than I did with any of my other kids or other kids. So I'm wondering if all of that had an influence. And he was at all the gigs from little. And I used to play the piano. But I did play the piano with the other kids. I made them all my kids would tell you, "Yeah, you forced us to play, but we hated it." And I'm like, but this kid took to it. So you just don't know who's going to get what. You know, and Sasha Perry just recently made fun of me. "Oh, man, it skipped you. What happened to you? You didn't get perfect pitch." And we laughed. And, so it doesn't really bother me. I love it. And I always mess with people with perfect pitch because, and I do envy it, but I realize that doesn't make you a better player. It just makes you hear stuff quicker. But it doesn't make you a better player. You still got to practice just as much as the next guy. And that's what I tell my son is because you have perfect pitch don't mean you got to practice. So, I got him practicing what he has to do, and we'll see what happens. Even if he doesn't want to be a musician, that's fine. But it's such a great gift to have of being able to play music, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, attorney. And you can sit down and play some music and just zone out, and women love it. All that stuff. People always envious of us musicians, and I understand why. So yeah.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report, reporting live here at the Terremoto Coffee Room here in Chelsea, here in New York City. Make sure you go out and support Gregory Lewis and his Organ Monk Blue, which is now available on iTunes, Amazon.com, as well as Apple Music. Also, please visit his website for upcoming club and tour dates, as well as you can order his 5 CDs online. Also, I'd like to personally thank Rick and his staff here at the Terremoto Coffee Room for their warm hospitality. For more information on their upcoming jazz jam sessions here, hosted every Saturday and Sunday here at the Terremoto Coffee Room, please visit them online at terremotocoffeeroom.com. People, please like, share, and subscribe to my videos here on The Pace Report here on YouTube and Vimeo, as well as visit my website, thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.